Kia ora koutou katoa, nei rā te mi atu kia koutou, mai te nota, mai te tonga, te tai hauauru, me te tai rāwhiti, tēnei rā te mi kia tātou katoa. Ko tōku ingoa, ko Mason Ngawhika, he uri tēnei o Ngāi Tahu, o Te Arawa Waka, tēnā koutou katoa.
I ngā mana, i ngā reo, i ngā karangaranga maha o te motu, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kario i te maunga, ko Whangaroa te moana, ko nā te whakea me nā te kairoku hapu, ko Anaru tōku ingoa, ko ai tētahi kaimahi mo tēnei ropu hioranga whānau, no Monaco Manurewa-Papakura. Tēnā koutou.
Tēnā tātou, whakalupulahi atu, ko Alexander Whitcombe tōku ingoa, huri tēnei te ati haunui a Paparangi, rawa ko Lakepa Opu Iwi, no Pukiko i ahau. Kia ora.
Ka pai! And we've got a big team today, so kia ora koutou, ko Nikki Timu tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no Ngāti Rangi Nui, Ngāti Kahungunu, me whakatohia hoki. So kia ora everybody, I'm going to start our presentation off today, and this is our very first time doing a webinar, so aroha mai, we're newbies at this and at the technology. But yeah, I think just before we go into our wairua-centred approach, I'm going to start off by giving a little bit of an introduction about who we are at Healthy Families. First of all, our national kaupapa. Secondly, our local kaupapa here in Monaco Manurewa-Papakura, South Auckland Ward. And then finally, I'll go into some of the stuff around how we work, what we do and how we work. Ka pai. So just in terms of our kaupapas, Healthy Families New Zealand is a large-scale national initiative that covers 10 sites in Aotearoa, and we're currently funded by the Ministry of Health. Our initiative aims to bring together community leadership in a united effort to target chronic disease and health issues for better health. Essentially, we are looking to improve health outcomes for people in places where we live, learn, work and play. And we have 4 focus areas at the moment. So one of them is to eat well, to be smoke-free, be physically active, and drink alcohol only in moderation. So we're coming at things from the prevention system or the health prevention system, and we're underpinned by a set of guiding principles, including, I guess, and being more explicit in and around Māori, we're targeting equity. So looking to improve Māori health outcomes in particular, but also look to drive out of the box thinking and innovation and look to test things across the system in a collaborative way. And then I guess that's sort of a bit about our national context. Next, we want to have a little look at our local context. So who we are at Healthy Families Manukau Manurewa-Papakura. Ooh, my slides are going to work for me. Aye. So just in terms of Healthy Families Manukau Manurewa-Papakura, we represent the Dirty South, and I guess we serve 325,000 people in our area. We represent also 2 wards. So first of all, the Monaco Ward, which is inclusive of Māngere o Tāhuhu Local Board and Otara Papatoi Local Board. And then the other ward that we represent is Manurewa-Papakura, so both the Manurewa and Papakura local boards. Healthy Families Monaco Manurewa-Papakura is also delivered in partnership alongside Alliance Community Initiatives Trust, which is the space that we're in right now. Also Auckland Council's the Southern Initiative, Ngā Mana Whenua o Tāmaki Makoto, and of course the Ministry of Health as our lead funders. In terms of the work, we're mandated to work alongside local leadership and key stakeholders to drive community-led solutions. So having the community own and really be part of solving some of their own issues and challenges that they face. Given the high population, so you can see a few of the stats on the slide there, given the high population of Māori living in the South, we also are working closely with them to enable and support Māori leadership, and also use some of the indigenous frameworks to drive the innovation along the way. So working alongside mana whenua, working alongside mātāwaka, and bringing some of the traditional knowledge that we know from the past and bring that into contemporary today. So yeah, that's a little bit about our national movement, our local movement here at Manukau Manurewa-Papakura. But in terms of the way in which we work, so collaboration for us is key. So working collaboratively, like I say, alongside communities, but also alongside stakeholders to think differently around some of the underlying issues that are causing chronic disease for our whānau. We also take a systems approach. So Mason will talk specifically around what a systems approach looks like from a Māori worldview a little bit later on. I mentioned before, innovation is key to what we do. So we use design thinking methods, including co-design and a wairua-centered approach, I guess. That's probably more of a mix between indigenous frameworks and innovation, which we'll, like I say, go into a little bit later on. But also test new ideas and assumptions as part of our role here. So yeah, like I said, ka mua ka muri, it's about really going back, having a look at some of those things that worked really well for us in the past. From an indigenous perspective, our whānau here will talk about some of those things. Maramataka is something that we're currently using in our work at the moment and is trending, I think, in the space. And so, yeah, it really is bringing that into contemporary today and learning how to build it into the work. One important thing that we thought we'd like to mention from the outset is that we don't claim to be the experts in this area at all, but we do aim to create the platform to have the conversation. If it's a courageous conversation or if it's just a conversation that comes naturally to you and your organisations, kei te pai, but I think it really is just contributing to the kōrero and widening the discussion and exploring the space a little bit more. So we're really lucky here at Healthy Families. We get to dive real deep into some meaty kaupapa and be explorers and discoverers. So yeah, that's sort of a little bit about the context of who we are and what we do. The boys are probably going to give a little bit of a brief overview now of what it is that we're talking about in terms of Māori systems return and a wairua-centered approach. Kia ora. Yeah, that's you.
Kia ora koutou. Systems. So today I'm going to talk about Māori systems return. So what is a system? System is generally a type of cycle that the intent of that cycle is to look for an equilibrium and harmony. So we have systems all around us. We live in the universe, which is a system in itself. There are more galaxies than stars in our own Milky Way, Te Ikaroa, which is a system in itself. And of course, we live within the solar system, which is a system in itself. All the planets and the moons are aligned and in balance. Should there be imbalance, moons or planets would just float out to space and then we'd all perish. So balance is really important. And of course, here on Earth, there are systems amongst systems amongst systems. If you were to get just 1 cubic centimeter of dirt, and there's a system of millions and millions of microorganisms, but they are also part of a greater ecosystem. So there's systems everywhere. If we look at our own bodies, we have systems within our own bodies. We have the cardiovascular system, which is a system in ourselves. And even at a more granular level, we look at the cellular level, there are systems in place as well. Each all connected, nothing is in isolation, everything is connected. All looking to find balance. Often there are shifts in balance and then the universe or whatever will find new equilibrium. And to prove that we are part of the universe, if we were to look at our body, the explosions from stars billions of years ago is the makeup of our body. We're made up of stardust. If we were to look at our makeup of our body, we're made up of the volcanic eruptions that happened millions of years ago. We are made up of the carbon that is extracted from plants, from the air, in which when we eat those plants, we get that carbon, or if we eat the animals that eat the plants, we get that carbon. So we are literally made of the universe. So we are part of this system and everything is connected. So what is a Māori system? The Māori system, if you were to break it down, we would call it under mana atua, mana whenua, mana tangata. Each should not probably sit in isolation. So, but just be aware that all those three po are going on all at the same time. Now, when I ask what is a Māori system, I always ask this question: what allowed us to populate the largest area of the Earth's surface, 1/3 of the Earth's surface, and to not only survive but to thrive? And of course, it is our systems that allowed us to do it. So what are our Māori systems that allowed us to populate the Earth? So if I was to look, first and foremost, when we came to Aotearoa, we needed to adapt to the environment. We came from somewhere different, so we needed to adapt. We needed to sync with the environment. Secondly, obviously there's our genes, which is a form of taonga tuku iho, which I will not talk about that so much today. We had a kinship system, a kinship system, a strong stratified social system based on leadership, gender, and kinship, where everyone knew their roles, everyone knew their social responsibility, the overall intent to promote the collective, the social system. We had a thing called tikanga, we had a concept called ritinga. These are our behaviors. These are the behaviors and nuances that we operate from day to day that promote the greater good. Now, if we were to behave in certain ways that diminish the collective, then over time we would perish. So you either perish or you modify your behaviors. Those behaviors were to sync with the environment. Now, what are the drivers of those behaviors? We say mana, tapu, and whakapapa. Mana is a big kupu that I'm not going to define completely, but in this context, mana is about that sort of force that we have in ourselves that drives us to improve our status in this world, improve our position in this world. If we are fishermen, to catch fish for the hapu. If we are tohunga, to do the perfect karakia, we are all driven by the secret power of mana to promote our position in this world. Tapu is another big kupu, but to me, tapu is about the balance between the environment, wairua, and people. So the point of tapu is to create balance in the universe, our world, and our lives. If you look from an individual perspective, Hirini Mokomi says our ambition in life is to get balance of our intrinsic tapu, and thereby we ensure that our physical, our mental, our social, and our spiritual sides are taken care of. So tapu is about achieving balance. And whakapapa is the why. Why do we do what we do? Whakapapa is about enhancing and promoting your whakapapa so that the descendants after you will be in a better space than when we left them. So that's whakapapa. So mana, tapu, and whakapapa are what drives tikanga and ritinga, and that allows us to flourish in this world. I'm going to talk about, so an example of that is our food system. So whether we're talking about kai of the forest or kai of the gardens or kai of the sea, it was always the epitome of sustainability. So these are systems. For instance, Pātuna in the Whanganui River and its tributaries, at the beginning of the century, there were 350 Pātuna. And they had a system, one particular hapu had a system of using only one Pātuna of a particular tributary once a year. So over 9 years, they would only use the same awa once. That is an example of systems. In the wairua within that area, when they saw the hao ika or the hao tuna, which was the giant female tuna, longfin tuna, that was the tohu to stop catching tuna. For manu, we never caught them in the nests. We would always wait till they were in their best condition when certain fruits were ripe, and you'd only catch them then because it's not appropriate to kill the youngest generation. With titi, which is the exception, you did catch them in their kōwhao, but you only took the babies, the young, not the adults, because they are the breeders. And so we've got many examples. What are the examples of a Māori or an indigenous system? What you're trying to do is align yourself with the environment that you live in, behave in the way that aligns with that environment, and to ensure that you create harmony sustainability, so you promote and enhance your whakapapa for generations to come. Kia ora. So that's Māori system. So I'll get to that next. So the way for us to understand Māori systems and indeed indigenous systems is good to contrast the difference between Western ideologies and indigenous ideologies, because there's a massive sort of rift between the two. For instance, a Western framework is that we are above nature, and of course an indigenous framework is that we are part of nature. There's a focus on the individual versus the focus on the collective. Yeah, and obviously there's the focus on the nuclear family. From an indigenous perspective, it's the extended family. There's a focus on Te Taiao Tangata, the built environment, versus the Te Taiao, the natural environment. There's transactional relationships where you have relationships where there's an agenda to benefit or achieve something, versus whakawhanaungatanga, where you utilize notions of aroha and manaaki-tanga to nurture relationships without a hidden agenda. Western ideologies, especially economically and in terms of our government, we think in short term. For instance, governments really only think in 4-year cycles because their agenda is to get in every year. Indigenous thinks about, they utilize the generations of the past, they focus on the now, but also more importantly focus on generations in the future. Squares and circles is this concept that we use a lot. Squares is known as the Western system, straight lines, black and white, siloed, where circles is more of an indigenous system which focuses on cycles and connectivity and being part of a greater whole. And of course, finally, I'm going to law, L-A-W, versus law, L-O-R-E. You mentioned this word that I talked about, tikanga, before. The words kawa and tikanga are often used together, but in my understanding, kawa is the law of the atua, the law of the gods. It's the natural order of things. We can't change kawa. These are set. There are many examples in stories of Maui who he tried to change kawa, he tried to defy death, and ultimately he perished. So kawa is the law, nature's law is the law of the land, and we need to align with kawa. Tikanga is slightly different. Tikanga is tika, what is right. Now, if you were to look at tikanga now for Māori compared to tikanga before, it has changed a lot because tikanga is up for debate. It can be modified. We can discuss what is the correct protocols and behaviors for us to promote our well-being. So tikanga and kawa is different. You should not mess with kawa, you align kawa. Tikanga is up for debate and can be modified. And that will lead us into the Eurocentric versus wairua-centered approach.
Over to you, Anaru.
Kia ora tātou anu.
We're being timed.
So, as Mason's just alluded to, there's a Māori sort of concept of what a system and a Western system. So, although Māori are affected by the same systems that affect other New Zealanders just by everyday living, there are specific outcomes desired by Māori which stem directly from being Māori or from a Māori worldview, as we've just heard. I'd like to reference our good friend Dr. Ihirangi Heke, who's spoken previously on one of these webinars from a whakapapa approach, which is very similar to what we use from a wairua-centered approach. So he's specifically stated he's shifting the focus on patient-centered care, not by removing the individual, but by placing him or her within a web of connections. What sits at the center of this perspective is not the individual, but the interactions between the individual and the context within which they live. Mātauranga Māori puts these connections at the center. So it's interactions and interconnectivity, which is the focus, and how we engage with the environment around us. Now, this can be reflected strongly in the whakatauki, kua hau te taiao, ko te taiao kua hau. The ecosystem defines my quality of life. And that's where we look at it from a wairua perspective. Sir Mason Jury asserted, without a spiritual awareness, the individual is considered lacking in well-being. And we know from the well-known Ngā Tapa Whā model of hingingaro, te taha hingingaro, te taha wairua, te taha tinana, and te taha whānau, that the wairua concept is one of the most important constructs. Wairua is seen as fundamental to Māori existence, what it means to be Māori and what it means also to be human. A sense of wairua has many dimensions from karakia, tangihana, mate Māori, rongoa, makutu. It's also, in today's sense, the first spiritual faith belief, but simply it's what makes people feel centered and uplifted with their connection to their natural environment. To quote a good friend of mine, Mark Scott, ko te ora o te tinana tera, ko te ora o te mauri tera, ko te ora o te hingingaro tera, ko te tau o te wairua tera. So for us, it's envisioning an environment, Te Taiao Tangata, Te Taiao, that contributes to the health and well-being of all the people that reside there. So that's where we don't prioritize, well, we prioritize, not preference. Human-centered design is a kaupapa that I'll let Alex just briefly.
So human-centered design is a process that has been used for commercial sense in the past. That's what it's deeply known for, the ability to extract information and sell it back to someone. So it's traditionally used for products, services, the commercial use. And I think what's important to acknowledge is the philosophy that sits behind it. So the way that we use it in Healthy Families is the ability to deeply connect with people, to empathize, to understand their lived reality, connect to the person. We're decoupling it from the extraction point and actually building genuine relationship, trust, whanaungatanga, and connection. And then what we're trying to do is kind of couple that with a wairua-centered approach to think about the generations ahead, think about the 7 generations.
So with human-centered design, it's used quite widely in the environment. What we're doing is just adding an indigenous layer to that through what we call wairua-centered design, which basically prioritizes nature, the quality of the interaction between people and the surrounding environment. It's not simply a call to return to nature. It's more about striking a balance between development and environmental protection and recognition that the human condition is intimately connected to the wider domains of rangi and papa. Wairua-centered design, as Mason said, is about harmonizing people with their environments. So the key question for us now is, what we say is, through wairua, who are we designing for? And as with the slide, you can see the Eurocentric model that has come through colonization, puts man at the top of the pyramid. It's having domain over everything. As you can see with that image, it's unsustainable, and the outcome is not desirable. Whereas when we put ourselves back in that cycle, within that circular system, we're in sync with nature, and it brings in those other elements around the environment that we should be starting to design as part of our well-being. You see in that quote there, nothing in this world was created or simply emerged to exist in isolation. Even the invisible can be detected by its impact. And that's come from one of our visionaries, our kaumātua, who's been heavily involved in the direction that we pursue, and that's Matua Ririata. And again, as Mason alluded to before, around taonga tuku ihoa, that's that intergenerational transfer of knowledge between the generations. Again, to reference Mason Jury, he suggests it's not uncommon for Western science and indigenous knowledge paradigms to find some common ground without compromising the foundations that they are situated. Research at the interface aims to harness the energy from 2 systems of understanding in order to create a new knowledge that can then be used to advance understanding in 2 worlds. So that's where we incorporate that indigenous lens with human-centered design as well. It's looking into our ecosystems. Mason sort of alluded to the systems which heavily focused on ecosystems and nature. Our communities are constantly changing. People, policies, programs, and politics, economies, and the weather are all part of constant flux around us. Resilience, or the ability to adapt to change, is an essential ingredient that needs to be understood and built into community change journeys. We have a lot to observe from our ecosystems in nature, from long-term occupation and observation from tangata whenua, through phases of birth, life, death, and the natural world, which can be usefully paralleled with evolution, development, and the collaboration process at project, organisational, and community levels. And as alluded to before, we look to a system of maramataka, which is, as Nikki said, is trending, and there's an ecosystem that's building in our environment at the moment, which encompasses all that. Yeah, so in this next slide, specifically in the area that we are in Manukau, you look to that image, and that's Hayman Park, and that's a park that's going to have a lot of investment going into it. So I suppose the lens we put over it is a mātauranga Māori lens, and the money that's currently going into, generally people would put a template approach of putting in a basketball court, a playground, whereas when we've engaged with mana whenua of this rohi, of this area, they've put the emphasis on enhancing and building up that water system, which is a stormwater treatment plant, but it's still wai. And what's within that water system is taonga, is tuna. And from their perspective, that's where the mana is, that's where the focus should be. So when we put investment into it, from a wairua-centered approach, when we put the environment, we focus on enhancing the quality of water, moving it from a place of stagnant, mauri noho, into a place of mauri order of flourishing. So that's the sort of paradigm, reframing the paradigm shift that we're looking at taking is when we create health promoting environments, we start with the natural elements first. And it's not to disregard the built elements of playgrounds and basketball courts, it's just bringing another indigenous perspective lens and focus to the kaupapa.
Awesome. So now we're going to sort of switch it up and just talk a little bit about the mahi. So what we've been up to, how we've been applying a wairua-centered approach to the work, and also how we've been integrating indigenous frameworks into what we do every single day. So some of the examples that we're going to share with you, well actually Anaru's already shared one with you around the Transform Manukau Pānuku Hayman Park kaupapa. So we're going to do a little bit more of that now and hopefully fire any questions across if you have any along the way. But the first one is around Te Hononga Culinary Reserve, and that's what Mason's going to give a kōrero about.
Kia ora koutou anō. Before I go into Te Hononga Culinary Reserve, I'm just going to talk about a concept that we call taonga tuku iho, which means treasures handed down, generally from above. So taonga tuku iho, often we think of that as maybe a waka huia or some type of taonga, but it's actually bigger than that. So it's actually about addressing the equity of resources. And in particular, can be about the natural environment as well as other types of resources. So taonga tuku iho is very important. So if you were to look at this image right here, here we see a maunga in the background, and we see tikoka, a tupuana, and a type of wetland area. Now, if you look at that back of that maunga, that's Mātuku Tūreia, an area which was a pā where people lived and flourished. Now, that is just a remnant of a maunga because it had been quarried. So, an example of taonga tuku iho, where some people decided that it was okay to mine and quarry a maunga and leave just a small remnant of its former beauty. Example of a poor example of taonga tuku iho. Secondly, we see some tikoka, and someone, I don't know when, and I'm not quite sure how long tikoka grows, but someone came along and definitely planted those for someone to enjoy later. That is an example of a taonga tuku iho. We were planting a number of plants that day, but one of them was the kahika tia, which can grow, which is our tallest tree, which can grow over 60 meters long. None of us will be around when those trees grow to 60 meters in height. We will be dead in the ground. But that is an example of taonga tuku iho, where we've left something for the next generation. Now, we talk in South Auckland just one generation ago, people were fishing out of the Otara stream. People were gathering koura in Manukau, and in one generation, now we can't do that. That is, for example, of leaving stuff for the next generation because the economic system has decided that it's okay to pollute the water, that it's okay. If you go into the city, nearly thousands and thousands of houses are made out of kauri. Now there's about 55, 60 left, and everyone's sort of crying about that last stand and the problems that we're having. But there was no thought of taonga tuku iho. Money was the atua of the time. So we need to be thinking more long-term about what it is that we leave for our next generation. This is the first generation who are going to die at an earlier age than the last generation, probably in human existence. So we really need to address the concept of taonga tuku iho and the equity of resources, and of course the equity in providing for the natural environment. Next, please. Okay, so an example of this is the Culinary Reserve. So in that previous slide, that was actually on the Culinary Reserve, which is 200 hectares of moana, takutai, whenua, awa, ripo, maunga. It's an amazing place. It's got so much potential, but it's also a work in progress. Currently, cattle and horses and whatnot sort of rove around and do their business everywhere. So it's a work in progress. But from a taonga tuku iho perspective, you can see that if we gave it some tender love and care, this could be a really amazing place. Now, if you were to look at the image on the left, you see this is an area in part of Manurewa called Clendon. Clendon is probably one of the lower socioeconomic areas of South Auckland, very disadvantaged community, and some of those mesh blocks in there, the average income is $14,000 a year. So highly deprived communities, but we were in that area. We have put a pop-up shop and we gathered approximately 800 insights of the experiences and the lives of people who live in that area. And one of the things that came out was, one, there wasn't enough facilities for young people. Two, that the wairua element is missing in the area. The narratives, the rich history, the Māori identity is not in the area. And also the built space and the infrastructure didn't allow for people to connect to green space, to areas to work and such. And yet, if you were to look at this map, just across maybe 40, 50 meters on that red line that you can see, there's this amazing space, and yet no one from this community has ever been there, because to access it requires one to drive quite a far away and come around through a back door. So we want to improve the health and well-being of this group living in Clendon, but how is it that we do it? We could do a human focus and focus on the people, but we're coming from a wairua-centered approach, and we want them to access this area of moana, maunga, awa, whenua, and by doing so, you will promote their physical well-being through riding bikes and walking and climbing the maunga, through social well-being, because most people here in South Auckland do stuff together to get us activated into doing exercise. It's generally because of shared relationships. We want to, obviously, the connection between mental health and connection to the environment is well known, and by allowing this population to access the area, there's another promotion. Of course, the wider aspect, by connecting to this area of has a rich history to maunga, awa, and whenua, it'll allow people to connect with their spiritual well-being, to understand the stories of the area, and so. And so to do that also requires us as to restore and revitalize that area, because it doesn't. The Puhinui stream, you can see over there, it's not the cleanest of awa around, and so stuff needs to happen. So this is an example of a wairua-centered approach, because the focus is not on the people per se. Focus is on the environment, and then we harness the social capital of the people to come around under the kaupapa kotahi, and from there the benefits will radiate out into the community. And so for us, one of the areas that we do in South Auckland is we're creating connectivity. We're creating connectivity between each other, we're creating connectivity between us and the environment, and we're creating connectivity to the unseen voice, which is the wairua, which is the ecosystem that exists in there, which is our tupuna and their dreams and aspirations, and the generation to come as well. So that's an example.
Thanks, Mason. So
Did I stick to the time?
you did
Thank you.
generally, but we have a pātai. We have a pātai from our good friend Leilani around taonga tuku iho, and you may have already answered it. So aroha mai, but can you give us a little bit more around whether taonga tuku iho is part of a wairua-centered approach, and how, why?
Oh, absolutely. Because often when we talk about aspects of taonga tuku iho, we think of it more in the material sense, you know, that you pass on your house to your children, and then they get a cash injection, which allows them to buy a house, and then, you know, they're in.
Yeah.
And then the next descendant generations will probably benefit. You know, Pākehā Europeans are really good at that. But we often forget about the taonga tuku iho in terms of the environment. I mean, I just think that I'm not that old, but I can remember swimming in rivers. I never swum in a river in Auckland because you can't, you know. This generation's missed out on a really, what is essentially a Kiwi iconic upbringing, is swimming in rivers, going off ropes, doing bombs in the water. We have to go to a swimming pool. We have to go out to semi-marginal, degraded ocean water around here, swimmer pool. So I think it's that side of thing, and it's also the wairua side of things as well, because behind every maunga, behind every awa, there is another realm, and that is the spiritual realm that we can't see, but the veil is thinner at places like maunga and awa that are clean, which allows you to access the wairua part of the environment.
If I could just add to that too, if we look at in our area here of Monaco, we have the Puhunui Stream, and again, there's going to be a bit of investment and regeneration into that area. Traditionally, or 50, 60 years ago, when they originally did development, urbanisation around the awa, they diverted it, they affected the flow of the stream, and that affected the ecosystem and the biodiversity within that stream. And as Mason said, you took to 1 generation ago, that was a food source for inanga, for tuna. It's not so now. It's a dumping ground for trolleys and paru and rubbish. And so when we talk about taonga tuku iho, is the state that we've received it in, we have to ensure the state we pass it on to is better than what we've had it for our mokopuna, our future generations. So yeah, definitely ties into that wairua focus on connection to environment, especially when it's got that pātaka kai o te ora framework around it, that it was a food source.
Okay. We've also got whānau here from Dunedin. We've got Richard Egan, who is loving the kōrero so far, but is wanting to know a little bit more about what wairua elements are missing. So we'll move on to the next example, and then hopefully we'll have you guys be able to pick up some of the missing elements of wairua in that, if that's okay. Richard, hapai. We're going to head over to you now, Alex, who is going to give us a little bit of a kōrero around te puanga mara.
Kia ora whānau. So puanga mara is a collective, but the ingoa, the name itself alludes to the star of puanga, rising puanga, and also the growth of working as a collective, referring to the mara, being able to grow and nurture kai. And so this collective is a collective of 3 marae, Papatūnuku marae, Manurewa, and Makota marae, in relationship with the Southern Initiative, Healthy Families, Te Puni Kōkiri, OMG Tech, and the University of Auckland. And the whole collective is built on the ability to whakawhanaungatanga, whakapiti kōrero, to build genuine relationship, to understand, see person face to face, and understand what it looks like to create a shared philosophy together. So to exchange, understand each other's worldview, kind of really ground us and have the ability to wāngana. And so the first year was all about building that relationship, understanding what a genuine, localized treaty partnership could potentially look like. And so the first year, as I alluded to, is whanaungatanga, the relationships, understanding each other's work program, see how the synergies align. This year's been all about mātauranga. So if we can see in this photo on the screen, you see Papaririata, given this kōrero out at Himātao around the ability to read tohu, to understand your working environment, be able to connect between rangi, papa and moana. And so when we think about this opportunity and we think about the current trajectory of innovation, if you can think of the bell curve, at the front you've got your visionaries. So the classic example today would be your Mark Zuckerbergs, your Elon Musks, and then your early adopters, and then you start to go further on into your cynics. When we start to complement this strategy, we think about bell curve as our visionaries, our tupuna knowledge. It's our tuhunga, our kaumātua and kuia. And the role that we're playing is actually the enthusiasts. We're the people that is actually practicing, trying to take our ancestral knowledge and practice it in a modern context. And so it's our job to kind of expand that curve and bring people along the journey. And as we've been part of this relationship, it's about the intergenerational knowledge transfer. So you've got elders passing the knowledge down to our practitioners, our rangatahi are now starting to catch on and understand the context that they live in. I think it's really important to understand where we come from in that context and be able to take the leading initiatives around innovation, technology and enterprise and explore what that looks like together. So the third phase is actually around kaitiakitanga, around the ability to practice, to share, to trial and error and expand. And so as we alluded to earlier, one of our guiding kind of philosophies is around the maramataka, being able to connect, read the tohu, understand and wayfind the way and make progress. And so some of the examples of the projects we've been working on is around tohu planting, the ability to identify time markers in our environment, being able to plant them, being able to build our relationship and understand the companionship between species. We think about the wairua-centered approach, it's all connected. One species relates to another, and how do they communicate? We've also got different rōpū, toi whaioranga. Rōpū has been working on water quality testing on the Pōnui stream. So using maramataka as time markers to test, understand the ecology, be able to relate and understand the tohu. And what's been great is actually having Mātauranga Māori and Western science kind of complement each other to understand and build a deeper knowledge base. And then lastly, one of our projects has been around why with opportunity, Anaru whakamanuwai, to shift our behaviour and focus around it being a commodity to being taonga. So that kind of shapes that curriculum in a nutshell.
Awesome. Kia ora, Alex. Richard, we are totally getting to your question. The question at the moment, sorry, just for everybody else, is how can we nurture an environment where wairua and spirituality can flourish at a national, regional and local level? I think we've got a really good example around that. So we're getting there, hey? We're getting there. I'll just move on to the next slide. Oh, this is still you, Alex.
Yeah,
so keep that in mind, Dave, just that kōrero, that question.
So He Kākano is a three-way partnership between Healthy Families Manukau and Manurewa-Papakura, also with Toi Tangata and Manurewa High School. And the opportunity was to understand how we can potentially decolonize education or re-indigenize education. And our starting point was actually around how do we reframe hauora in a mainstream setting. And so for us to start our kaupapa was around grounding it and actually being able to inject and put a Māori worldview at the centre of our learning, starting with Ngātua Māori, being able to provide that context, that learning platform for everyone to start with. And what we learned in that process is not necessarily about the ability to learn Mātauranga, it actually came down to being able to identify and find themselves in the identity. And so what this looked like is the ability to co-create curriculum with students. So we were able to support them to be active change agents in their school environment, in their curriculum. And as we started to progress through this project, what it came down to is designing their curriculum, what they wanted to learn, the ability to share with their students the wider school, to bring the whole of school along on the journey, being able to create a deeper relationship between students and the teachers and develop the tuakana role, And then what it came down to is how do we bring the home and the kura closer together. So there was an opportunity for whānau to come in, to walk through, hear their stories, hear their learning journey, and actually shape the next direction of the project. And so the whakaaro came down to they wanted to focus on why, because they believe that if you have healthy why, you can grow and nurture healthy kai, and be able to eat healthy kai will give you clean energy. And so that was the kind of their thought pattern. And that the whole next term became all about why. They had a chance to decide how we staged our 10-week program. They thought it was important to actually go back home, hear these stories of the awa, connect to hear what it's been used for. Some of it's used for tourism location, to go catch tuna. And so all those kind of stories help them shape their context. And the important part is actually how do you take this learning and grow it in your community? So we aligned it to a localised event, which happened to be the Puanui String Challenge. And as you can see on screen, the whakatauki around what's the most important thing in the world. And they adapted it, like we talked about tikanga, and remixed in their way. And then we think about a wairua-centered approach. It's about not only the people, but it's also the whenua and the wai. And so this actually stems into the next project, which is the Puanui String Challenge, which took place in last year.
Cool.
And so that was our opportunity to work alongside multiple partners, and how do we take a council event and actually flip it to not just be about a fun hikoi for your whānau, but actually have the opportunity to connect the community who have been living in the area for many decades to the awa and create that relationship. So we allowed the framing of this event to be with Manurewa-Papakura step through and give a kōrero and explain the whakatauki to kind of ground the event and think of, so people could go around and think of them as passive, as active participants in the event. So originally it was a scavenger hunt, but we worked quite closely with a collective to see how we can put the underpinning of the event with mātauranga Māori. And so with the Māori Taka happened to be all tāne day, and so we had 6 points along the journey. And so normally it's 1K, 2K, 3Ks, but we actually set it up to have different tohu of the area. So for example, the kumara, the manu, the whetū. And the idea is how do you blend culture, environment, technology, and movement all together? And so, it's building to a wider thinking around nurturing the ecosystem from Maunga to Moana.
Ka pai. So I'm really mindful that we are a little bit running out of time. We've got about 6 to 7 minutes left. So we want to get to your question, Richard. And I know the guys have an example.
Oh, still going to be a question.
Yeah, we can use that question to lead into this next image here. So, in South Auckland, 66% of those Māori surveyed through Te Kupunga survey said wairuatanga was important to their health and well-being. So that's huge. It's over 2/3. So it has to be incorporated into how we design. Again, it goes back to the question, who are we designing for? And I think Mesa's got a little bit more kōrero to add to why how we see wairua encompassed in our approaches.
This possibly just my opinion, but we have sort of these human environments and we have the natural environment. Human environments, we have homes, marae, urupa, churches, which has a sort of intrinsic tapu. And then on the other side of the environment, we have things like maunga, awa, ngahere that has its own mana and tapu as well. So I believe that if you want to promote wairua, you need to enhance or allow the mana tapu and the Māori to exist in areas, whether it's a built environment or a human environment. The closest connection to the atua creates the most tapu areas, which allows the wairua to exist. So for example, a polluted stream is so dirty, it doesn't have the ecosystem to support life very well. And so it loses that natural tapu and mana. And therefore, this is not a place to connect wairua, whereas you go to a nice, clean environment, which we call urutapu, and then that opens up the wairua space. The veil is at its most thinnest in these areas. And so creating those areas that allows people to connect with the mana and tapu, and allow wairua people to connect to wairua. I think that's one of our goals here. We can do it in a built environment, and we can definitely do it in the natural environment.
So an example in the slide here is a tangible example of prototyping experimentation. Alex alluded to it before. We've been looking at the maramataka, an ecosystem that's been building nationally, regionally, across the motu. This is an example where we partnered with Pānuku, Southern Initiative Council and AUT to create some 12 pou that were aligned to the different whetū, kaupeka te tau, phases of the lunar cycle. And these were used as foundation stones to create places of wairua in public spaces. Again, flipping the script on our places of being just in marae and just at kura kaupapa, but also how do we set in our daily environment. So each one of these, at different phases of the moon, different stars rising around when's a good time to plant, times for fishing, and it creates a space to create wānanga and possibly dawn karakia. Again, this is a prototype for to shift the system for bigger investment into the way we look at our health promoting environments, our green spaces. So it was successful. We engaged 5 mana whenua carvers and also people from a rough sleeping background. So it was a good example of kotahitanga, and there's a little video here that we could possibly play. Just
now we're really stretching our technology capability, but we'll give it a go. If I click on this puppy over here, is that gonna do it for me? I wonder if they can hear it. Maybe give me say yes if you can hear it. I'm hoping you can.
They'll look thousands of years up. So we'll leave a little mark on it. I believe in the future. The future's now. If you look at it right now, it isn't 5 minutes. So what can you change between now and then? My thing is being able to connect Joe Boggs down the road with indigenous culture and empower them. I like to challenge things to make sure that people are on their toes. Yeah, I do like it really fun. I want to inspire children. There, you can make a difference. You can change it. You can throw a little spark at them and you can watch them burn. Like into a big fire of awesomeness. I feel like a big kid myself. I pretty much am. My wife will tell you that. I'm hoping that these become foundation stones for what it will become, solidifying our traditions of the future. For the future, all I can hope for is the best for our people. If I'd like to see something happen, it would be to people to unify, like on a real whānau level, just get back to the roots.
Ka pai, I'm not totally sure whether that went through, but I'm hoping it did. But what I'll do now is oh my gosh. Hold on. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to Mason to probably just wrap up our kōrero. We've still got things to say, but at the moment I'm thinking there might be a possible part 2 opportunity for a webinar, as this is definitely getting recorded, so you guys will be able to access it later. But our original idea actually was to go up the maunga that we showed in the picture before, and so we'd really love to still do that, maybe go Facebook Live or something and really stretch our technology capability and go up the maunga and do another sort of part 2 up there. But in the meantime, I'll just hand it over to Mason to sort of wrap us up a little bit. And then if you've got any final questions, if you chuck them in the chat space, that'll be choice.
Just to go back to that kōrero about the wairua, probably what I missed out was there's intrinsic tapu and extrinsic tapu. So the intrinsic tapu is the natural world. There's tapu in that. And if you're talking about the built environment, you need to make it tapu, which is the extrinsic tapu. And that is a wairua space as well. Anyway, so here we look at this image that Anaru and we happened upon when visiting the Te Puni Kōkiri. We saw it on the wall, and straight away we said, wow, look at that image. And the image actually shows what the maunga that was in the original photo looked like. So there was once an iwi that lived between Mātuku Tūrea and Mātuku Tūruru. Mātuku Tūruru is no longer, it is a hole in the ground, and Mātuku Tūrea is just a part of a maunga. But if you look at this, to us, it really inspires us to let us know what it's all about. Here you see an iwi that is obviously thriving. You can see some waka in there. They've come from the Monaco harbour. They're drying fish over there. You see them living in their little hamlets. A whole area of some intensive horticulture. And it's just a perfect example of living in sync with the environment and people thriving. Everyone knows their roles, and it reminds us of what it used to be and what it is now. I probably didn't show it in that earlier image of the Puhinui Reserve, but where that village is now, there is now a prison. Now there's the Woody prison. So we've gone from whare tupuna to whare here here, and so that's to us is a massive contrast and what we really need to work with. So this is probably, I was going to do another kōrero, but we've got to go. But what I'm going to say is we've got to stop being victims of change, and we need to be the drivers of change. You know, we need to have our own destiny in our own hands. We are the kaihautu of our waka. We look at the indicators, we utilize what was behind us, and we look at the indicators for present, ahead into the future. Behind us is the paitawhito. Right now, just ahead of us is the paitata as we head to the paitawhiti. We are not to be like tā whauwhau, which is basically flotsam and jetsam in the ocean that just goes here and there based on the tides and the winds. We determine our own destiny, and we really advocate the wairua-centered approach, which is a strong environmental emphasis. We do not preference the environment. We prioritize it because the kawa of this area makes it a necessity that we do prioritize the environment, because that is, you know, rangi nui, papatuanuku, they are the parents, and that's our priority here. But we will all, the ecosystem and humans alike, will all thrive when we get in sync with the natural kawa, which is the natural order of things. The wairua-centered approach.
Awesome. So we've got a couple more questions. However, we have run out of time, so we're definitely going to come back and answer those. April Warwick wants to know how can we use a wairua-centered approach with Kai and influencing health with the easy accessibility of fast foods and processed foods today. We've totally got ideas around that and are working in that space, so we'll get back to you, April. And Leilani again is really looking forward to a second session for some deeper discussion, and Ellen is and Richard are both happy with the kōrero. So I thank you so much for the opportunity to I don't know, share some of our discoveries and our exploration phase with you, and definitely, you know, we're so privileged here at Healthy Families Manukau Manurewa-Papakura, where we get the opportunity to play in this space all day, every day. So yeah, really looking to for other opportunities, please get in touch with us. I know Toi Tangata will probably put our details up on their page, and we'll share it too.
That was our first one, so
yeah.
It'll be better.
Cool. Oh, look, here you go.
Ka pai, kia ora koutou, tuatahi ka mihi ki te rōpū nei, ko whakatakoto tēnei o ngā mātou runga ki runga i a mātou. Big thank you to everyone who's attended the wānanga today, our webinar. I think the whole process sort of, I guess, demonstrates how us as Māori have always been innovators, and how we're looking to try and find different solutions for different aru that have occurred across many lifetimes. Our tupuna were really good at that and utilising different systems, like the team have just discussed. So I think the way forward is to continue to collaborate in those systems and create opportunities for more of us to be working together. So kia ora kia koutou te tima. There's been a lot of good feedback and a lot of good questions that you guys actually didn't see also in the chat as well. Right. So we will make sure we get back to all of you through that. Stay tuned for the part 2, hopefully. But when everything's sort of wrapped up, this will go on to the Toi Tangata website and also onto our Facebook. So, he pātai anō tā koutou, you'll be able to ask there as well. We'll be able to get the team to get back to you. No reira, kia ora koutou, mai te tima o Toi Tangata, anō hoki, Healthy Families Manukau, Manurewa-Papakura. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Ka kite whānau.